some of us who've been Christians a while, maybe, I mean, we feel like we go through seasons, and maybe we're in a point now where we feel a little bit stuck in our relationship with God. And so I think some of the spiritual practices, some of the prayer practices you're going to talk about today are ways that we can sort of try different approaches to God and to trying to develop that intimacy with the Father. So let's start with a basic prayer model that a lot of people find helpful, and that is called the ACTS prayer model, ACTS. Tell us a little bit about that.
The ACTS model is just a template. It's meaning it's not a formula or recipe for prayer, but it's a springboard to help you communicate with God. And the picture I get that I kind of want to set the stage with before we go on is if you look at a mother with her small child that doesn't talk yet, but you watch them, you can tell that they are communicating with each other without words.
Yes.
But there's a deep connectedness, a deep bonding there. And I think that's what we all yearn for in our relationship with God. But like you said, we're not sure how to get there. So that first type of prayer I'll offer is ACTS. So the first part of that is, it's an acronym for Adoration, Confession, Thanksgiving, and Supplication. And the first part, adoration, really has to do with focusing on who God is and meditating on that and remembering his goodness and his tender mercies and his majesty and his holiness and all the things that we've learned along the way, and trusting that the Holy Spirit will help us as we're in the process of adoring him. It's easy to get it mixed up with the Thanksgiving part, and I'll get to that when we get to Thanksgiving.
Get to the T.
Get to the T. So the C for confession, I know in my spiritual life there have been times where I think of confessing like, oh, I shouldn't have yelled at my daughter this morning when she was late finding her shoes and we were all late to school. And those are things that we should bring specifics to the Lord. But sin is a much bigger problem. It is self-sufficiency, living outside of God's implanted power in us through the Holy Spirit, and just living out of a self-sufficiency and doing it on our own strength. So really, maybe sitting in a moment of silence and just asking the Holy Spirit to help identify in your life ways that you're trying to do it yourself without God's intervention, without his help, without his guidance. So that would be the next part of the ACTS prayer. So we've got adoration and confession, and the next part is thanksgiving. And it's easy to switch for me when I'm in the middle of adoring God to sometimes thanking him for what he's done for me. But in adoration, the focus is on God. And in thanksgiving, the focus is God, but it's also thanking him for his abundant provision, his tender mercies.
It's thanking him for his actions towards you and in the world.
Right.
Rather than just his being.
Correct.
Which is what we adore him for. Yeah.
Correct. And finally, the supplication is just really delivering to him all of our burdens, the things that we carry with us that...
Yeah, that's a fancy word. We don't use as much supplication.
Correct.
But it fits with the acronym, so you got to have it.
It fits with the acronym, but it's really just coming to him and giving over to him the burdens that we carry, the intercession prayer for other people, those type of things that can interfere with our relationship with God if we're not giving them over to him.
Yeah, and what I love about that model, and like you said, it's a template. It's not supposed to be something rote. That you have to check the boxes. It's not about that, but just keeping those categories in mind. That I love it that the requests are last, because I think sometimes when I go to the Lord, the first thing I take to him are my wants and needs, which he cares about, and he wants us to do that. But I find when I go through that process of actually adoring God, confessing where I'm at, and being really honest with God, and then thanking him, it changes the things I pray for. It changes the requests I make, because I feel like I'm more in line with how God sees the world than how Lisa sees the world.
That's a great observation, Lisa, because it does reorient us. And
yes, that's a good word.
prayer is a transformational process of relating to God. And I like the example that imagine your most precious relationship, and every time you met with that person, you said the same thing over and over and over again. And you ask the same questions and you make the same requests. That relationship would wither. And that's sometimes what we do with the Lord. So the Acts template helps us to think through in our spirits and giving it up to the Lord, our adoration, our confession, our thanksgiving, and our requests.
Yes.